Thank you. It is easy to lapse into cliché when trying to explain the importance of comedy. I usually, myself, refer back to a great old line near the end of a great old movie, The Last Hurrah, when Spencer Tracy, playing a dying political boss in Boston, turns to one of his aides and says, "How do you thank a man for 1,000,000 laughs?" Now, the context of that scene is a bit different than tonight, but the phrase certainly applies to the woman and men we'll hear from tonight. Why is Roz Chast funny? She grew up in Brooklyn. Enough said. She sold her first cartoon to The New Yorker in 1978, has been making us laugh ever since, with close to 1,000 cartoons in the magazine. Her latest work is a children's book entitled Too Busy, Marco. Bob Mankoff is also a New Yorker born and bred, and after serving as a cartoonist for The New Yorker for many years, is the cartoon editor at the magazine. He is the author of The Naked Cartoonist, A Way to Enhance Your Creativity, and he is known to be one of, if not the best, cartoonist / ping pong player in the nation. This is serious. If someone took Al Jaffee's early life story and brought it to a Hollywood screenwriter, it might be rejected as pure fantasy. Suffice it to say that Al survived a tumultuous upbringing and then made a life by making people laugh. I'm not saying that Al's been at this for a while. I'm just saying he's been doing it since before the Johnson administration. I don't mean the Andrew Johnson administration, but it's close. Al started working as a cartoonist in the 40s and is perhaps best known for his 1964 creation, Mad Magazine's Fold In. His story is told in a new book entitled Al Jaffee's Mad Life by Mary Lou Weissman. Now again, our evening will begin with 3 separate presentations by our guests. So please welcome Roz Chast, Bob Mankoff, and Al Jaffee. It's all yours.
All right. Whoa, look out there. This could take a while. The cartoonist. Hey, I'm gonna start it off. We're gonna do 3 presentations. We're gonna go really fast because we want to have time for Bud to interrogate us and for you to do question and answer. So I'm asking you to hold all your laughter till the end. Hey, look, each one of us is going to sign books. I'm Bob Mankoff, and we just put out the New Yorker Cartoons of the Year, and we'll get to the books. A little bit about me. I sort of have 4 jobs. I've had 4 jobs. I'm a cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. I'm the cartoon editor for the New Yorker magazine, and I've licensed cartoons to the Cartoon Bank. And, you know, I don't know, do they give a course in ethics here at the Y? But really, people would think there might be a conflict of interest in this. I mean, I'm doing the cartoons, I'm buying the cartoons, I'm licensing the cartoons. I just want to assure you I've appointed a blue ribbon committee, which I'm heading. I think I'll be cleared of all charges. Okay, but I want to talk tonight a little bit about me as a cartoonist. So one of the things you do as a cartoonist is you show some cartoons. So I'll show a few of them. No Thursdays Out, how about never, is never good for you. I'm sorry, dear, I wasn't listening. Could you repeat what you said since we've been married? 1 billion is 1,000 millions. Why wasn't I informed of this? And say what's on your mind, Harris. The language of dance has always eluded me. Now, this is a little story about how I became a cartoonist. Now, when you become a cartoonist at the New Yorker, it's great. As you do cartoons like Roz has, they pile up, they put them in a book, and they save them, and when you die, they put that little part at the end. But as I'm not dead yet, I'm keep going. But I actually had a reasonable start to be a cartoonist because, like Al, I went to the High School of Music and Art, and there's my diploma to prove it. And there I am over there. Now, the High School of Music and Art was not that good for me. How did I get in? Well, this is something I drew maybe 2 years before, but by the time I got in, you had to show a portfolio, and I knew that people had 2 ears. I made a real breakthrough, you know. And anyway, I got in, I showed a portfolio, but the people at Music and Art was so incredibly talented, unbelievable. Like this guy, Paul Olswang, look at that face. Anyway, he did cartoons with Robert Crumb and did these great underground comics. I mean, people were fantastic. They knew what they wanted to be. Look at this guy, Edward Barak. You see him? He's got a pipe. Look at this, he's got a pipe. Do you know what he became? He became the Dean of American Pipe Designers. These were people who knew what they wanted to do even then. What did I want to do? I wanted to play basketball for the High School of Music and Art. There I am. I invented the famous Mankoff defense, which was that if they couldn't see the basket, so then, after I got out, completely convinced I could not draw like these people, and believe me, I could not draw. I went to Syracuse University where I majored in hair, as I still do. The only thing I was good at, even marginally at Syracuse, and I did a little drawing and everything, was I did well in psychology, so I decided I was going to become a psychologist. And here I am, like in the 70s, you know, trying to humor my rat. But seriously, you can't miss it. Just take a right and then two lefts. What we really had put the rats in was these Skinner boxes, which are now outlawed by the Geneva Convention. But at that time, and they had to press the bar to get food. And we had schedules of reinforcement. So sometimes they press and they would sometimes they get 2 in a row. Sometimes they go for 10, and they became very, very persistent. That was the whole thing, schedules of reinforcement. My mother was happy with this. My son, the doctor, is. But I was not as persistent at this rat, and I went to my mother and father, and I said, look, I'm not going to be a psychologist. I'm going to be a cartoonologist. I tried to fool them a little bit. And I said, no, I'm going to be a cartoonist. I want to be a cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. My father turned to me very seriously and said, you know, they already have people who do that. And I said to him, you know, you're right. You don't actually see this in the magazine. But I was convinced. I said, look, maybe one of them will die. And I persisted. This is me. I cut my hair, kept my beard, and I really cartooned. I did cartoon after cartoon after cartoon. I really wanted to get into really any magazine. And then I realized I was on the same type of schedule as the rat. Because every once in a while you'd sell a cartoon. Then you go a long time and you became obsessive, persistent. I want a cartoon. I did sell cartoons to like prestigious Saturday Review. This was the first cartoon I ever sold in '74. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, no steno. That shows how far that was. I also developed, to disguise my inaptness in drawing, I developed a very convoluted style. Please tell the king I remembered the punchline. Look at all those dots. Totally insane. I also tried to sell cartoons to somewhat less prestigious magazines. What can I say? I was a 70s dude, always up for a caper at a carnival. Anyway, but I couldn't get into the New Yorker. You know, couldn't get into heaven that was the New Yorker. And that's what I desperately, you know, wanted to do. You know, I had enough, like, this is not everybody's experience, but I must have done 1,000 cartoons between 75 or 77 before I got into the New Yorker, but, you know, all rejected. This cartoon I did, what could I do? So these were the type of cartoons I do. This is a guy typing, and then the newspaper is coming out. And I said, well, maybe the problem is I have too many dots. Now, it turned out not to be the case. All I had to do was take this idea and rearrange the dots, and it would get into the New Yorker with this cartoon in which there's a guy at a printing press, and it's coming off, and he's having breakfast. And if we look at the names of the people here, some of them still do cartoons. I still do Ed Koren, Lee Laurent, a number of others, but there's a name missing, a very important name. Someone who would sell her first cartoon the following year, and that is Roz Chast, and I ask you to welcome her.
I know there's sort of a big question of which way you, well, anyway.
Clicker there?
Well, I guess I could do it this way too, right? You got the clicker? I have the clicker, but then I have to, I don't know. All right, I'm going to use it this way. All right. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I didn't make up that slide, but anyway, that's my last collection of cartoons I did, and that is my latest book. It's a children's book called Too Busy Marco. Anyway, this is a sort of autobiographical sketch that I did for. Actually, I wound up doing it for Oprah magazine. They had asked me to supply a photograph of myself as a child, and I said, I don't want to do that. Is it okay if I draw a picture? So they said, okay, sure. So I have a picture of myself lying on my bed. I'm 9 years old, and I'm looking at the big book of horrible rare diseases. And I'm surrounded by other publications, the Lockjaw Monthly. I don't know why so many children seem to have. I think it's because you play on a lot of playground equipment that has rust on it. I was thinking about that the other day. Like, why are so many people I know? Like when I say, yeah, I was really afraid of lockjaw when I was a kid, and but I never knew anybody who had lockjaw. But you know, I knew you get like one cut. I played on a lot of rusty equipment, so you know that was it. Everything you always wanted to know about scurvy, but were afraid to ask. Diseases of the tropics, A Child's Garden of Maladies, and then the book that was sort of like the Bible in our house, which was the Merck Manual. And, you know, I didn't really understand most of it, but I could read symptoms. And I knew that there wasn't really a lot of leprosy in Brooklyn, but it wasn't like there was none, you know. I mean, there's no such thing as none, so, you know. You never knew. Somebody could come back from vacation, and, you know, there you go. Anyway, this is a sort of recent cartoon. This is Pigeon Little. And it's, the sky is falling. The sky is, oh, look, part of a bagel. This is Gifts from the House of Low Goals. People always ask, like, where did you get your ideas for cartoons? And this one I actually did get the idea. I was on a train, Metro North train, and I saw this ad for Carvel, and it was this ad for an ice cream cake, and this little girl was sitting in front of a cake, and she was wearing her glasses, and she had a little hat on her head, and she's looking at a cake, and on the top of the cake it says, "Congratulations on your new glasses." And I just thought, like, boy, you know, that's a little strange, I think. I've never seen a birthday cake, a cake for that. So anyway, I have I survived conjunctivitis. I can read a bus schedule, 100% human DNA. We have special occasion cakes. Wow, only 6 cavities. Happy tattoo removal. And no loitering arrests in 1 year. We have cards. I'm so glad you're not an arsonist. And congratulations on your new easy chair. And the trophies are just participant. So we have, this cartoon sort of did come from life. This is When Moms Dance. And I don't know if any of you have teenagers, but I think there's a certain age where just your very physical being arouses disgust in them. And, you know, I do understand this. I mean, I feel the same way myself. You know, I look in the mirror and it's like, oh, God. And if you want to really put a cherry on top of that sundae of disgust, all you have to do is dance in front of them in like a certain rhythmic way. And one time I did, and she actually said to me, she said, "Mom, stop! You're hurting me." And I said, "Can I use that?" And she said, "Okay." Anyway, this is sort of the declension. This is I don't even know how to read these words, but this is hoax ethnic food. It's just I don't know. I'm not going to read it. This is a obituary guy, I guess, and I don't know if you ever read obits. This is kind of a tunnel of love gag. This is narcissist cards. I love greeting cards as a sort of genre, although I know that they're sort of probably on the way out, although I've seen some ones with like little tape recorder things inside of them. I don't know, they're still making them, but they get more complicated now. But anyway, this is wow, your birth, this is, okay, so this is a narcissist card. Wow, your birthday is really close to mine. Isn't that amazing? And this is a sympathy card. I once had a sad thing happen to me too. I can hardly speak about it without crying. And speaking of bon voyage, guess where I'm going? France. And this is the little engine that coulda, woulda, shoulda. He's saying, I knew I could, so why didn't I? In Insomnia Jeopardy, we have I don't know if you can read it. Can you read it back there? Oh, okay. We have ways in which people have wronged me, strange noises, diseases I probably have, money troubles, why did I say that, and ideas for a screenplay. This is Donna Karen's nightmare. This is just, I love drawing lamps. But anyway, this is birth, bed, bath, beer, bankruptcy, bunions, bifocals, balding, and beyond. But what I really, I love lamps. I just, always wonder, like with other cartoonists, what their favorite thing to draw is. And I would have to say that I love lamps so much, and I don't really know why, but I love when they have like a lamp that has a few functions in one. Like this one, it's a table, it's a lamp, it's a table. No, it's a table and a lamp. But one time I saw a lamp, and this was so great. It had a wastebasket on the bottom. But then I was so amazed, and I was telling a friend about it, and then she said, well, how could that be a wastebasket? Because you'd have to, like, if you were emptying it, you'd have to, like, pick the whole lamp up, and I still don't know. It's a mystery. This is dousing for coffee. So, in a just world, we have dunce and bitch. I'm not going to read this too long. This is how to drive your man crazy in bed. What exactly is the flavor of Dr. Pepper? Do you love me as much as you did when you married me? Do you ever have this ringing in your ear? Whatever happened to Dwight Gooden? How do you make a magnet? What's better, plasma or high def? I don't know. This is also what my husband refers to as questions till you burst. Because sometimes I'll ask him, not to really get on his nerves, but just because suddenly, like, I'll realize I don't really understand anything about magnetism, and I need to know. But, and he'll tell me something. I know he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the delusional world of the free-range chicken. This is the life, isn't it? You said it, sister. I'm going to explore that big, wide world out there. Ain't no stopping us now. This is a cover I did recently for the magazine's little guy laptop. You just haven't seen it. This is a tuned in, turned on, dropped out, dropped in, worked out, saved up, dropped dead. This is the vain but realistic queen. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who, if she lost 10 pounds and had her eyes and her neck done and had the right haircut, could in her age group be the fairest one of all? This is just the end is near, you wish. And I think that might be it. Okay. Thanks.
Jaffee, ladies and gentlemen.
Just click this to go forward.
Okay.
This one. Okay.
Yep. Well, from the sublime to the ridiculous, here I am. The first picture you saw was the cover of my biography, which came out in September. And the first picture you're seeing here is the Hamburg Railroad Station, because I was, in effect, a reverse immigrant. When I was 6 years old, my mother took me and my three brothers back to the little town that she grew up in Lithuania. And we lived there longer than I care to. And this is a picture of my upbringing in Savannah before going to Lithuania. And these pictures are out of context, so there isn't much that I can say about them, except that they're in the book. And one of the things I made my father promise when we went to Lithuania, that I wouldn't miss any of the funny papers that I was in love with when I was very, very young. And he did send them, and we would get a huge roll of Sunday funnies. And my brother Harry and I spent a lot of time learning how to draw by copying the pictures in the funny papers. Here, it's in the scene here is in Savannah, where my father intrigued us by copying the characters in the funnies. This is the central square in this little town in Lithuania, and we're arriving in a horse and buggy. And this is our first dinner at my grandfather's house, and it was, kind of we didn't speak the language, but we could sort of understand what was going on. This was the bathhouse that my mother insisted on taking me and my brother Harry to, and I think it corrupted our feelings for the rest of our lives. This is a feature that I did as a newspaper comic strip. Well, not a strip, it was a comic panel. And it ran for about 6 years, syndicated by the New York Herald Tribune. Now we jump to work that I did in MAD. This is from a feature that I created called Snappy Answers to Stupid Questions. And I guess you can read it up. Oh, you can't? Well, then I'll read it to you. This is a disaster area like in New Orleans. Were you upset when you saw that the tornado did? No, it's somewhere else, I guess. Were you upset when you saw what the tornado did to your house? No, not when I realized we'll have oodles and oodles of kindling when we rebuild our fireplace. No, my home is more feng shui this way. No, I always wanted to sleep under the stars. Actually, these are not terribly good out of context, because the 2 pages that they appeared on in MAD, which usually had about 3 to a page, were on a theme, and these are extracted. Do you need a waiter? No, just direct me to the kitchen and I'll serve myself. I'm sorry I couldn't hear you over the sound of my stomach growling. Why not? I'll eat anything at this point. Washing your car? No, I'm washing my driveway. My car just happens to be in the way. No, I'm applying a attractive coat of soap-colored paint to my vehicle. I don't know. I have to get this filth off to see if it's my car. Ooh, a talking scale. Will it say my weight when I get on? No, it'll say a prayer before you get on. No, it hasn't learned to count past 300. No, but it may plead with you to get off. Was I speeding? No, you were standing still. It's the scenery that's been whizzing by at 90 miles an hour. No, I got lonely and decided to stop you for a little chat. Sorry, could you repeat that? My ears are still ringing from the sonic boom when you passed me. This is a feature I created for MAD in 1964, called the MAD Fold-In. In it, a question is answered, is asked, and when you fold the page, a new picture appears with an answer, a new answer. In this one, what is the one hero fans never seem to tire of? And it's a picture of many superheroes coming out of a super multiplex. And the answer is to what is the one hero fans never seem to tire of? Guitar Hero. This is a very big thing with young people. In this one, there's a picture of an ice floe and a dead moose, and a crowd of people, and it's Sarah Palin and reporters and so on. And the question is, what important inhabitant from the north was in over their head this year? And the answer is polar bears drowning because of global warming. The picture, when folded, turned into a polar bear. In this one, it's it's a pigsty, and there are men who are pouring food and swill and whatever they do in those places. And the question is, what potential health threat has been linked to the nation's pig population? This came out at the time of the swine flu. And the answer is Denny's Grand Slam breakfast. I guess that's it.
If we could turn the screen off, that would be great.
Yeah.
So all of you have done hundreds of these, thousands of these pieces of art. Do you know, Roz, we'll start with you. Do you know when you've got it? Do you know when this is done, this is what I want to say, or are you constantly tinkering?
A little bit of both. Although I think deadlines have a lot to do with when something is finished. But yeah, I think there's a certain point where I want to leave it alone, especially with like a longer thing where I feel like, well, this is as good as I can get it for now, and maybe if I came back to it in a week, I would see another way to tinker with it, but I can't take it any further right now.
Bob, you'd see both yours and you see others.
Well, I mean, like Roz said, I think, deadlines concentrate the mind wonderfully well to make you think you have got what you need. Yeah. And really, that's the important thing, to have what you need. The idea that somehow there's the absolute perfect thing that's better. There's many, many variations. Like when the cartoon No Thursday's Out, How About Never is Never Good For You. Originally I had it as No Thursday's Out, How About Never. And then I realized that the two different messages are, the syntax is polite and the message is rude. So that's why it's a little bit better to say is never good for you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you do the work. I think what happens actually is with the work that's rejected, both my own work and Roz's work, you come back and look at that, and often you get inspired to make it a little better.
Al, when you sit down now, after all these years, at the blank piece of paper, are you confident there's going to be something there when I'm done, or do you still wonder, will there be something there when I'm done?
Well, yeah, I guess it's always that way when you're freelance. You're only as good as your next job. And I've been fortunate, I've been fortunate that Mad Magazine has kept me on for 55 years.
I think it's going to take. I think you're okay there.
Well, and I guess they got used to my way of thinking, and I got to know what they wanted, and I also never had a problem with editors. In fact, I like good editors because they keep me on my toes, and the so I could come up with material. Satire is easy to come up with because the world we live in is ridiculous. There's, in every day's newspaper or on television, there is some news item that is so preposterous when you really think about it, that with a little bit of manipulation, it can easily turn into, something satirical. Not I don't think I'd be very good at doing what Roz does or what Bob does, because I think there's a very special skill involved in distilling a big idea into one picture with one line. I have the luxury, I've had the luxury usually of having 2 or 3 pages to start and then work out a whole thing.
Bob, when you look at all of the cartoons that you're given on a weekly basis, do you ever fear that because you're looking at so many of them, that you'll almost become desensitized? And that if you're looking, how many do you get in an average week to look at?
Overall, it's about 1,000.
Okay, so is there ever, and you've been doing it for a while, is there ever a concern, if I got a cartoon in, let's say, like the first 100, I might look at it as opposed to differently?
That's my training in psychology. I'm a licensed humorist.
Okay.
And that's different than amateurs who can just look at this stuff. No, the truth is desensitization is good, because once you understand it, because if you think you're going to look at cartoon after cartoon, people think that the job is entertaining me, like I'm an audience. And you're not going to laugh at them. What you're able to do is judge that this, just like yourself, when you do your work, you judge this works. And I think people who look at that and say, oh, I don't find it funny, or it didn't, they don't understand how subjective that is. Like sometimes you've had people or editors say, I'm not in a good mood. The mood shouldn't matter. After a while, when you're a professional, you understand, gee, this joke isn't working. Either the lead up is too clunky, that happens, you really haven't worked it right. And so I think that's the desensitization. Once you understand it, actually helps you, because you become not biased. Also, the other thing is you learn to look at them in, let's say, bunches of 40 or 50, not actually the 1,000.
I'm always intrigued by, obviously, people's backgrounds and how it leads to what they do in any field. Roz, there is a great quote that I found, perhaps it's even accurate, basically saying that your parents' thought was comic books were for stupid people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did. They thought it was. They belonged to that generation that believed that comic books were lowbrow. They believed. Well, I shouldn't even say that. They belonged to that generation that believed in very clear demarcation between low culture and high culture. And for instance, they didn't even listen to Ella Fitzgerald or Frank Sinatra. They thought that was junk. It was pop music. I mean, the closest thing to pop music they listened to was maybe like Gilbert and Sullivan, or maybe Rodgers and Hammerstein or something like that. It's classical music.
So is there a first phone call or a first inkling or a first meeting with them when you go in and say, you may think this is for stupid people, but I'm joining?
I think that I think they were just happy that I was doing something and not bothering them. And I think, I think for me when I was growing up, and I was an only child, my parents were a lot older, they were busy, they were working all the time, and I think that I lived in an apartment, and drawing's very quiet. It's not like you're playing the drums, or I suddenly, was twirling a baton, and it could, it was like, this was like something I could do in a very small space and not bother anybody. And it was like, here, give her crayons, give her a pen, and she'll just kind of be happy for a while. And so that's sort of what I did,
It's interesting, because I had a similar experience in that my parents were older. I was an only child. And I'm sorry, my parents were older, and I was an only child, and they left me alone.
Right.
It wasn't this situation where childhood was so overmanaged as it is now. So if I would draw, they say, "Oh, that's nice. He likes to draw," but there wasn't these huge, ambitions, or okay, now you draw, you're gonna. And also, there was a huge prejudice against comic books. I remember I read comic books all the time, and then I don't know, I had spells where I got dizzy, and because I was neurotic Jewish crazy kid, I got dizzy. I had dizziness, and so they took me to the doctor, and they said he's reading too many comic books. Really, a lot
Really?
was blamed on
That's
comic
amazing.
books. A lot was, this type of thing, that they, like I said, it was not a respected form.
Although my parents did buy me something, it was like the worst of both worlds. It was classic comics. And this was like, it would manage to like ruin comic books and also ruin the book. And I just remember looking at them and hating them. It was just, because I did look at comics, and we got the Post sometimes, and they had the funny pages. But I think that they thought maybe I was going to be a teacher, because they were teachers. They were in the schools, as they called it, the school system. And I knew from day one it wasn't going to happen, because I really did not like school. But I was quiet. So.
Be a bad place being
Yeah.
a teacher if you don't like school. That would
Yeah,
not work out so
exactly,
well.
exactly.
Al, your story about growing up in Savannah, 6 years old, your mom takes you to Lithuania, her hometown. Your father comes to get you. You live for a while in Queens. You go back to Lithuania, and then eventually your father comes to get you and your brothers and brings you back to New York. And I'm just doing the Reader's Digest version of the story. It's an incredibly compelling story with so many twists and turns, and tragic twists and turns, and it's all in this book. Can you recall a moment where you think, this has been kind of a crazy life I've already led? I'm 13 years old, and not necessarily a kind life either. I'm going to make people laugh. When I get out, if I can do this for a living, and I seem to have some facility for it, I'm going to make people laugh, because all this other stuff is just awful.
I really didn't think of it in that way. The only way I could put it is that when I arrived in Lithuania, dressed up like little Lord Fauntleroy, and here were all these kids in hand-me-down torn clothes. Everyone was dirt poor. There were no paved streets. There were no bathrooms. There were, it was really like maybe the United States in the 1850s. And so I had to adjust to that world. But one of the things I noticed was that with all the poverty and a great deal of anti-Semitism, which was a known, the people managed to laugh. They told funny stories about the authorities, about how in order to get a permit to do something, what you had to know a Gentile person who could get you a hearing with the local authorities, and then they would make fun of it, and
These are the Jewish people who are making fun of this situation, right?
yes, the Jewish people making fun of the area that I lived in was essentially a Jewish ghetto, and so anything that they wanted to do to step outside of the ghetto or do business other than with each other, they had to have permits. There was a lot of that kind of stuff, and also, we were terrified. I was warned not to go outside of the area because one step beyond the pale and you got your head bashed in.
But see, it's interesting because this is, characteristic of Jewish culture, especially in Europe, and had a huge influence on American culture in that humor was one of the ways of coping, both for the Gentile world, your own problems, a way of sort of a little bit aggressive, making fun of the outsiders, a goyish cup, that type of stuff, and at the same time making fun of yourself. And I think that quality of, frankly, Jewishness from Eastern Europe, which then came over here. I was reading a story, in 1979, 80% of the people in professional comedy in the United States were Jewish. And this background that he had, and then the background that was transmitted, really are somewhat fearful about the outside world, looking back and forth, but at the same time making fun of yourself and that world, I think it really is
Yes,
formative.
as a matter of fact, the Jewish merchants and salesmen and none of them were into agriculture. The agriculture was outside of the town, surrounding the town, and the Gentile farmers would bring their produce into town on market day, which was every Wednesday. The Jews who learned to speak their languages, which was Polish and Russian, and sometimes Lithuanian, but mostly Russian and Polish, they learned how to entertain these farmers who came in from out of town, and they would banter with them as they were making deals to buy, the produce while they were selling them clothing, and so humor was the bridge.
Al, you told me once, you said to me, this is a couple of years ago, you said, it astonishes me that I still am functioning at a fairly decent level because there were a lot of dark days, but you have to reinvent yourself. You get knocked down, you pick yourself up, and you move on. Was that early history that you had, back and forth as you're starting to get going and working as a cartoonist and then eventually for MAD, is it something that you would use as something to spur you on, or was that over and done and I'm doing what I'm doing now and that's ancient history?
Well, I think the short answer is that I didn't know how to do anything else. I mean, I could draw from the time I was born, I think. I mean, drawing was very, very easy for me. And when I was selected for the High School of Music and Art, that kind of cemented my, this business for me. I was exposed to a lot more in art, in music and art, sculpture, printmaking, oil painting, watercolors, everything. And, it opened up a whole new world for me. So, but prior to that, I vividly remember being on a trolley car in 1933, and my father, I had told my father that I just wanted to be a cartoonist and an artist. And he said, no, you can't make a living at that. You have to learn a trade. And he wound up in the hospital at one point, and I, to visit him, had to get on a trolley car. And I looked up and I saw this absolutely, it was like seeing Tinkerbell, What I saw was a Dr. Seuss drawing, and it was Quick Henry the Flit. I mean, everybody in the Bronx at that time probably had some kind of vermin, and selling this insecticide was big business. But he had very funny cartoons. And I came back and told my father, there are cartoons in the trolley. That means you can make a living at this, and I'm going to pursue it. And maybe that was the beginning.
Worked out okay. Roz, you were 23 when you sold your first cartoon to the New Yorker.
Yeah.
What was the reaction?
From whom?
from everybody, from you, from your parents, from the people at the New Yorker?
I was pretty excited. I did feel that it was a fluke, because I think I'm just naturally kind of pessimistic. I was very surprised. I think that when it ran, there were a lot of people in the magazine that really, I think some, not just people who subscribe, but other cartoonists who really did not like my work at all. But luckily, you know, at
Was
20...
that spoken or unspoken to you?
I sort of, a little bit of both. You know, I heard about it later. I mean, actually, Lee Lorenz, who was the art editor, cartoon editor, the art editor, because at that point, the art editor did the selection for the covers and the cartoons. I mean, which is different from now, because now Françoise Mouly is the cartoon editor and the cover editor, and Bob is it. But anyway, I've lost my train of thought completely. This is so
Someone
typical.
said something mean to you about the...
Someone said something mean, and I
Yeah.
repressed it. So Lee said that when my cartoons first started appearing in the magazine, one of the artists asked if he owed my family money. And then later, you know, when I had been appearing in the magazine for like 20 years, occasionally some older cartoonist would come up to me and say, you know, I really like your stuff now, but when it first started running, I didn't like it at all, and now I understand it more. And it's like, well, okay, that's, you know, I guess gratifying.
Well, Roz invented, you know, I mean, the thing about the New Yorker, it's a very broad category cartoons. In fact, if you look at the beginning, originally they called them drawings. It was Saul Steinberg and William
They're
Stein.
idea drawings.
You know, it had a much broader aspirational aspect to it. And you knew if you do cartoons for the New Yorker, there was this buffer of the New Yorker itself, and they would do unusual things, and then people would come to it. And the truth is, Roz invented a genre. Most of the Roz's cartoons are not typical cartoons at all. They're very funny, but they're a narrative form. They're extended. They're sort of somewhere in between, you know, something like what Al does, or a graphic novel, and regular cartoons. And it's really, you know, uniquely her own. And so whenever anybody does that, it's disturbing to people who are doing the usual stuff, you know, knocking out another desert island gag, and truthfully, Roz's first cartoon that she had was indecipherable to human beings. It looked like it was done by a Martian. Too bad we can't show it. You described what the cartoon was. There were no people in it. There was nothing in it. There were just...
It was called Little Things, and it was these little doodles with made-up names, sort of like the kinds of things that if you're sort of doodling and you make like a little weird shape and then draw like a little like shape attached to that, and you call it like a hackeb or something. It's a very...
Okay, so there are 14 of these things, hackeb, chent, you know,
Dude,
Wickham, and they're little drawings, like you were on the phone. Okay, and so the cartoonists are looking at this, and they think, this is the end of the world.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I remember going to a New Yorker party, and it was my first New Yorker party, and one of a cartoonist whose work I really adored. I worshipped this guy's stuff. I thought he was amazing. He came up to me and he said, "Why do you draw the way you do?" And I could tell, you know, he was kind of like angry with me, and I was just like, oh. And I asked him. I did not mean to be rude, but I said, "Well, why do you draw the way you do?" Because I really, you know, I mean, I didn't really have a good answer. It was like, well, this is how I draw. This is what I think is funny. So, you know, I don't know. What can I say? And I guess he sort of took offense at that. And then, you know, I don't know. It was very weird. But recently I met his son, who told me that towards the end of his life, he liked my stuff. He started to understand it a little bit more. And
But one of the things that Lee Lorenz did, you know, cartooning at the New Yorker did change. It changed in that in the 30s and 40s, many of the cartoonists did not come up with their ideas. Peter Arno didn't come up with his ideas, George Price didn't, and these were bravura artists and stuff. They did create their own world. It wasn't like they were hacks from some idea, but Arno would put everything into the drawing, but Jim Garrity would give him the idea. In the 60s and then in the 70s, the idea was that the New Yorker, before us, wanted it to be more authentic. You wanted it to be one person, more like a singer-songwriter. And for that, and that enabled people with idiosyncratic styles, not just Roz, but Ed Koren and other people who would not have fit in, really, into the style of the 30s and 40s.
One book I like that's been put out by the New Yorker you put out is the Rejection Collection. And so, question for all of you. These are rejected pieces of work. For all of you, do you know where the line is? Where the line of this is going to be accepted, no, this can't be accepted, and how much do you do battle over particular pieces of work, be they in Mad, be they in the New Yorker, this should go in, no, this shouldn't go in, and how does that work?
Well, the New Yorker is different. The New Yorker is not a comedy club. It's mixed company, because right there are very serious articles, and people are looking at it with a serious, frame of mind. So in the New Yorker, in the Rejection, they're very funny cartoons. Just like you have very funny stuff in a comedy club where it's isolated, and everybody understands it's all in fun, and it's a little bit outrageous, and you're in that environment. But in the New Yorker, if all of a sudden you have a guy with a suicide vest on him, and there's a guy down below adjusting it, and he's saying, "Too snug?" That's not going in the New Yorker.
Mm-hmm. When was that? It's the famous one.
That
When
was
that?
from the Rejection Collection.
But when was that? What year was that? How long after 9/11 was that?
Well, not too far after 9/11.
Could you do it now?
No, you still couldn't do it now, or after the Danish cartoons, Sam
Right.
Gross, the great Sam Gross, hear me, Sam, the great Sam Gross, everyone about Muhammad and the cartoons, and everyone is so skittish, they won't publish. New York Times will not even they can't show you the
Right.
cartoons because, it's too simple, they're just punking out. And Sam does a cartoon where there's in heaven, there's Muhammad, and there's the suicide bomber, all in little pieces. And Muhammad is saying to the suicide bomber, you'll get the virgins when we find your penis. I think that's a great cartoon. It cannot go in the New Yorker, but it's a great cartoon. Because it speaks to the insanity.
Was it at all a close call?
No, it was not a close
Okay.
call. It was not a close
Al, can you, from all your years doing the fold-ins, ever any times where you thought, I'm not sure this one's going to fly, or did they give you a hard time about any ones in particular?
No, Mad has always been desperate. It bought everything I handed. Actually, I guess I got to know Mad, what Mad's readership, and I got to understand the editors, and I had about a 95% sale rate, which when you realize that I'm sitting at home and you can't banter with anyone. If you try it on your wife or children, they walk away without saying anything. So you find yourself looking around for something to inspire you, and you see something in a newspaper or a magazine. As a matter of fact, the fold-in, which has been around for 46 years now, was just an accidental thing where I noticed that real magazines, as opposed to Mad Magazine, like Playboy and Life Magazine and National Geographic, would occasionally have these fancy full-color fold-outs, gatefolds, 3 or 4 pages of it. And the only thing I could think of is Mad's cheapness. And I thought, what would Mad did not have any color in it at all at that time. It just the front cover and the back cover. So I thought, well, what flashed into my mind immediately is that Mad should do a cheap version of that. And instead of folding out in full color, it'll fold in black and white. The ones you saw earlier that were up on the screen are in color now, of course, because Mad is, along with other magazines, has gotten fancier. But at the time, in 1964, when I created this fold-in, that's how I came to do it, and it was supposed to be a one-shot thing there was never supposed to be a second one, and I guess they liked the idea, and as a matter of fact, when the editor came to me and said, "When are you doing another fold-in?" after I did the first one, I said, "You're kidding me. I shot the whole thing on that one. I don't know I don't have another one." It's like, you come up with the best New Yorker gag in the world, and they say,
but you said about when I look at that, I say, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's sort of there's a wow factor in the thing, and I was talking to some people, that I was going to be on with you, and it's amazing how many young people saw that, and were sort of turned on by the cleverness of it.
That's right. That's right.
Well, excuse me, I just want to finish that by saying, I think audience participation is always popular. When you read a magazine, you're a sponge. You're just soaking it all up. And so it's a breath of fresh air when you get to do a little activity, such as crossword puzzles and whatever that thing called with the numbers, Pokemon or...
Is there a, you mentioned, like if your wife or your kids may walk out, for all of you, be it family or friends or colleagues, no, this is funny. No, it's not really funny. No, trust me, this is funny. No, this is not funny. Has it affected relationships through the years?
Well, I'm divorced.
And I've been married 3 times. I think you learn not to show it for the most part. You do originally because, the other thing is that when you're doing a batch, in our case, you're doing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cartoons. You want to sort of put it out there. We do things for an audience in the end. And our opinions of our own work are somewhat shaped by the feedback eventually we get from the audience. Like when you're doing these presentations, you find pretty much, this is one you really like, but never quite works. And often you will like things just because you're very intimate with them that the audience is not so crazy about, and then, vice versa.
Before we get to our questions from the audience, one other thing. You're constantly providing material. You're constantly sending material into the magazine, looking at material for the magazine, providing material for Mad Magazine, in good times and bad. Can you tell me a little bit about the process, first in the New Yorker, and then now we'll talk about your career, material that you've provided and looked at after national tragedies. 9/11 is the obvious subject here in New York. And Al, for you, doing the fold-in throughout the 60s, unfortunately there was one national tragedy after another as the decade wore on. Can you tell us a little bit about what went on behind the scenes at the magazine right after 9/11 and the thinking behind when are we going to put our first cartoon in and what is it going to be?
Well, I was involved in that. So when 9/11 happened, it was an enormous shock to the system. Nobody, being funny requires actually not being in imminent danger. There's no jokes about fires in a crowded theater when there's a fire in a crowded theater. After, if you're on the street, it didn't work out and stuff. And so when it first happened, everybody was actually fearful. You could see the smoke and everything. Then, there was one other time in which there were no cartoons in the magazine, and that was the piece by John Hersey, Hiroshima. So David Remnick, decided, and I think there was a lot of people talking about it, that there shouldn't be any cartoons that week. And of course, then was that wonderful Spiegelman, that black cover, which was great. But the next week, Leo Cullum led off, and Leo Cullum unfortunately just died recently. Wonderful, fantastic cartoonist, did some of the just best cartoons ever. But the very first cartoon in the magazine the week after was a woman looking at a guy with a horrible check jacket, and she's saying, "I thought I'd never laugh again till I saw that jacket." And I thought that was a great cartoon because it basically said, if you're breathing, you're laughing. really you are gonna move on. So that was the first cartoon, and we were sort of ginger do it, but pretty soon, within a few months, we got right into it with some, the New Yorker does a different type of satire. The satirization the New Yorker does is it satirizes us, not them. So there's a great Bruce Eric Kaplan who's does very wonderful, dark, nihilistic cartoons. About 3 months afterward, it's a woman saying to another woman, "I know it's hard, but I'm getting back to hating everyone again." And that is a very deep cartoon. It says it tells what was going to happen when there's all this stuff about what wasn't. And Leo Cullum did the best security cartoon ever. So prescient. This was the same guy who did the first one. This is maybe 2 months afterwards. It's a woman taking a cat into the airport, and the security guy is saying, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're going to have to declaw the cat." And I think that, one of the things that all the cartoons do is they are the antenna, they are prescient, they actually look forward to seeing. So that was how.
Roz, in terms of creating, obviously that's the most vivid example here in New York, 9/11, but in the aftermath of something that's kind of nationally galvanizing, 9/11, let's use that as an example. How about sitting down, blank piece of paper? Was it different than a week or two before?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was very hard to think in the same way, for a long time. But I did have a very strange conversation with my parents who were in Brooklyn, and the New Yorker never published it. But I'm glad that I did it, because every once in a while I see it and I remember that time. And I called them up. They were living in Brooklyn, and I said, "Are you all right?" And they said, "Well, of course we're all right. We're living in Brooklyn. We're okay." And then they suddenly, my father's saying, "Well, I don't think we should go over to the Ocean Parkway Jewish Center." "Of course we're going to go over. They're going to be open." "No, they're not going to be open." They started having this huge fight over whether now meanwhile the towers had just come down. I mean, this is half an hour before. I've watched this totally surreal scene on TV and just thinking, I can't believe that they're still having the same sort of insane fight that they would have with each other over, whether that bakery is still, in existence on Avenue U, or whether it went out of business last year or whatever. And then they had the same conversation. They segued into a fight. My mother saying, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to march right down to that Afghani restaurant on Newkirk Avenue, and I'm going to get a takeout menu." "No, you're not." "No. Well, then I'll come with you." And I'm just sitting there on the phone thinking, these people are insane.
This is a story I have to tell, which is true and bizarre and strange and dark. My mother was dying when the towers.
Close to the mic.
I'm sorry. My mother was dying when the towers came down, and she was sort of out of it. And I went to visit her in Queens the day after, as the towers were down, and they kept showing the towers come down, and she's in this hospital bed in Queens, out of it, everything. And my mother was she was ready to dismiss everything in her own world in a way like that. And I said, Mom, we're looking at it. "Mom, did you see what happened? Do you see the towers? You know what happened?" She said, "Yeah, thank God no one got hurt." That's what she said. I never told her.
Wow. Al, in the late 60s, Mad Magazine is, as you indicated, is really giving young kids this idea of, wow, this can be funny, but make some kind of satire. It's art, it's funny, all kind of together. When you're creating the fold-ins, first of all, how long do they have to be in advance of the publication of the magazine? And also, obviously, let's say in a year like 68, there's one tragedy right after another. What was the juxtaposition for you in terms of creating fold-ins and then seeing them perhaps on the night after an assassination?
Well, to begin with, I don't think anyone takes Mad Magazine seriously. It just pokes fun at everything. But the editors do exercise a certain amount of sensitivity about. They're not going to show Alfred E. Newman pushing the Twin Towers apart like Samson. I mean, they're not going to do stuff like that. But what they in the early days, what we did was we made fun of our social mores, advertising, kind of easy targets when you get right down to it, or things like, the Christmas hate book. Don't you hate when there are 4 Santas on every corner of the street while you're trying to impress your child about it? I mean, this harmless stuff. And then it started to get more serious as time went by because, those kind of childish stuff, things weren't going over too well. So they got into more political material, but making fun of movies, making fun of television, making fun of the established things, that doesn't, whether there's a tragedy. During the war, Mad went on doing, the war in Vietnam. The only thing, I did a feature at that time called Hawks and Doves, and it was a very mild, gentle thing. It wasn't pro-war, anti-war, but it was just kind of poking fun at 2 characters, one who was a peacenik, and one was a hawk and one was a dove, and they were going at each other, but no one associated that with the war.
You have to remember the New Yorker and Mad are commercial institutions supported by advertising.
Right.
And so you can't look at it. If you want to really look in the 60s and 70s what was happening, it probably was the underground comics.
Yeah.
That's where really the energy was coming. Both the New Yorker and Mad, all these mainstream magazines were very, very careful because so it was very, very mild. You'd make fun of either beatniks or hippies or whatnot, but it really did not have, that's the truth of it, much teeth. Where you actually find the teeth now in the New Yorker in terms of, real satire is in the covers, guys like Barry Blatt and stuff like that, where you have and you do have a really, I think, a more partisan approach there.
Right.
Let's take some questions from the audience on your cards. This is for all of you. Is anything off limits in your work? What and why? Roz?
I really go by what I think is funny, and I let the editors make that decision.
I think as you get older, you're sort of like the id, ego, and superego. Part of it, as a kid, you think plane crashes are funny, and when you get older, they just don't seem that funny anymore. You know what I mean? I remember, and as I said, and I think there's differences between public humor, private humor, and even secret humor. So there's all sorts of things that you might laugh at to yourself or between people. Once it goes out to 1 million people, it's very easy to get distorted. Even stuff that's relatively mild, like we have a new cartoonist, Zach Kane, and he does some sort of very, very wild stuff, just funny stuff. So one of the cartoons he did recently was, it's a kid at a lemonade stand, and it said, lemonade light stand, it says conspiracy theories. But over the fence, there's like an evil-looking character who has put a dart into him. I got letters from child abuse and stuff like that, and children dying. Or let's say we have a cartoon, mild, okay, cartoon, so it shows it's a lab technician and a little rat in the cage has hung himself. And the line is discouraging data on the antidepressant. So that's about how far you can go, and you go that far, and you do get it. It's my brother-in-law died of that.
Right. This is to Roz. Is it true your kids juggled knives when they came to visit the New Yorker offices?
Well,
as David Remnick reported. It says
not
here.
both kids. Just my son, for a while, when he was younger, he was really into juggling in a very big way, and he did have machetes. Now, I'm not an insane person. They were like juggling machetes. You still would not want them to drop on your foot, but they were not, like machetes that you would use to harvest sugar cane or something.
That was before 9/11. He wouldn't have gotten hit.
It was before 9/11. Yeah.
With the machetes.
And at least he wasn't juggling his torches, because he did that too. That was like an outside thing.
Well, this as a follow-up is another one for you. Does it embarrass your kids that you are a cartoonist? Have they ever been embarrassed by a particular one?
If they have been, they haven't told me. It's possible. Maybe I'm just in denial about it.
Al, there's an old Dick Van Dyke Show episode where he's like Father of the Month, and he's all proud that he's been picked as Father of the Month, or that his son, nominated him as Father of the Month, and he finds out he's the last one in class to have been nominated. His son waited till the end, till they had nobody else, and he's Father of the Month because what does a comedy show writer do? Growing up, your kids, cartoonists, they're out in the front lawn telling all the kids about it, or, oh, geez, my dad's a cartoonist.
I think also, kids are more embarrassed, at least mine were, by things that you didn't really expect. I remember one time I picked up my son when he was at middle school, and I was wearing a T-shirt that had birds on it, and he said, "Mom, that's a crazy lady T-shirt." And I have no idea why. I mean, you don't really know with kids when they're at that age where, it could be just you're wearing a shirt with birds on it and it's a crazy lady T-shirt.
Right.
Not that you're a cartoonist. I mean, that's a given. Okay, you're just embarrassing. But this is, all their friends are going to see. They're going to see you in this shirt, and that's not acceptable.
Kids have a. This is not my story. It's Jack Ziegler, a great cartoonist of the New Yorker. He always used to say to one of his kids, I think Benjamin, that he's going into the New Yorker. And Benjamin thought there was a person, the New Yorker. So sometimes kids have a little bit distorted idea about what it is you do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
did you-
Can I just say this?
Sure.
When we lived in Park Slope, and my son was he wasn't quite 3, he was almost 3. And one time I asked him what he thought I did for a living, and he said, "You take your drawings on the train and show them to the men."
Shameless hussy.
Yeah, I know. I kind of like that because I thought, it's not that far off, really.
Sorry to disturb you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, right.
I know, exactly. But just to the men.
How's that train cartooning thing working out, Roz?
It's
Al, what
gangbusters.
response did you get from your kids growing up?
My son and daughter roll their eyes and say, "The famous cartoonist." They refer to me as the famous cartoonist.
Oh, that's funny because my wife and because I'm trying to be funny also, my wife says, "Oh, that's humor coming at us."
These are great audiences all, apparently. For all of you, how do you know how much information to give in the punchline? If you overestimate or underestimate the audience?
I think in the New Yorker, we always try to give the audience the benefit of the doubt. We know that we want that little delay, whether it's a punchline. Let's say it's a thing called French Army knife, and it has all corkscrews. Okay, so that's the little thing that we like. Mm-hmm. Let's say it's Einstein in bed with a young woman, and he's saying, "To you, it was fast." So that's the thing. We and then we run a thing every once in a while called "I Don't Get It," the New Yorker cartoon IQ test, where these are ones that were just unintelligible to people because there was too much. But we'd rather err really on that side rather than overdetermining it.
Some more. Is it essential to be an outsider to be a good cartoonist? Can you not be mainstream?
What's mainstream?
That's my question. Yeah, I don't know what mainstream, what is it?
I think it has changed a little bit, in that, at one time when you look at the comedians who came up and everything, they weren't good students, they didn't play nice with others, they didn't do things, and now really because there's a lot of money in comedy and sitcom writing and movies, really you have people who go to Harvard and they know they go into Harvard and they go into the Lampoon and that's what they're going to do. So they really are, right from the start, very mainstream, and their life isn't serendipitous. They know, hey, I want a job on Saturday Night Live, I want to write, then I want to direct, and I think that has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is for Al. What foolish, silly thing irked you today that you'd like to comment on, besides this card, of course?
Well, I really don't know how to answer that. I think reading the New York Times might fall into that category. But you know, there's so much foolishness. People, politically, of course, the foolishness is unbelievable. I mean, where people are voting against their own best interests. You know, people who say things like, I'm not going to let the government take away my Social Security. You know, it's all around us. I mean, Sarah Palin is a fountainhead of this kind of material. And, but how do you use it? Now, the way Bob and Roz use it, they distill it into a single picture, and you know, and you can get a big punch out of it. But I have to think in terms of 2 or 3 pages, and if it just doesn't have legs a lot of times, so it's a little bit more difficult to write a long article about it.
How about the suggestions of people that you know? You once told me that people just will see you at a party and say, hey, the funniest thing happened to me. A guy stepped in a puddle. Can't you do something with that? And you're like,
Yeah,
stepped
yeah,
in a puddle. What are you kidding? How often does that happen? That
Well, it
people
happens all the
who
time.
you think may have a decent sense of humor have suggestions for you, and they're
Absolutely. People who read the New Yorker religiously come to me with things like that. They say, oh, you got to do this. You can sell it to the New Yorker. And then,
Well, people also have what I call, this is snotty. They have they get so few ideas that they have what I call idea rapture. You know, they don't understand we're doing 10, 15 ideas a week, so they think I had an idea.
Right.
And usually it's very contingent. I was at my cardiologist, and this is a while ago, so I had an arrhythmia, and so they asked, what do you do? Oh, I'm, a cartoonist in New York. And he said, hey, I got an idea for a cartoon. I said, great, I got an idea for a bypass, so why don't we just call it a wash?
Yeah, can you sew me up first before you tell me what the idea is? Are there pieces of work that you've done that you've later regretted? Something that's been published that you looked at subsequently and said either it was, I don't know, hurtful, or although that's not really any of your style,
Yeah.
I understand that, but anything for whatever reason you thought, I shouldn't have done it.
I think I feel that way about everything that's been published. And I think that there's a kind of a, I don't know what the term would be. There's probably some long German word for it, where you can't see the mistakes until they're published, or until like that period where you can no longer make any changes. And whenever I see something in print, I see all the ways that I fell short. And it just happens every single freaking time. So I wouldn't say I'm kind of more used to it now, because I just kind of know now, like especially when I've done a book and I first look at the book cover, I know I'm going to be sad. And it's going to take a long time before it sort of subsides into like, all right, I can accept it.
Well, Roz is an extreme example, but I would say
Bob?
Roz is an extreme example, but I would say the difference between an amateur and a professional is an amateur really likes their work, and a professional doesn't.
Well, how does that manifest itself? I mean,
Well, it
what does that mean?
manifests itself in dissatisfaction. I mean, in the extreme example, it's the person who goes up to Al and they think this is a winning idea. And if he drew it, they would think this is the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
They haven't they've done very little in a domain. Anybody who does, Roger Federer thinks most of his shots could have been a little better. You know what I mean? It's being a craft and trying to do your best and realize that the ideal is always you're always a little bit short, and that spurs you on.
Now, you talk about mistakes, and I've heard musicians say that when they hear a song on the radio, one of theirs, that's all they hear
Yeah.
are the mistakes.
That's-
Have there been moments from an art standpoint, not necessarily the writing, from the art standpoint, where you've made a mistake, and I can't, that's terrible, I can't, maybe I'll leave it in. And
Well,
it turned out to be something that people, hey, that was pretty great.
Well, see, I think that's at least for me, it's like that's when I'm working on it, I can't see it. I might feel that way when I'm working, hey, this doesn't look so bad. It's like, but then when I see it in print, like, even if somebody says, that looked really great, I'll know, you know.
Well, there's a serendipity.
You'll know what?
I'll know that,
They're lying, or?
well, no, I'll know that it's not right, you know.
Yeah,
But in drawing, you have a serendipity in mistakes, in that you'll draw something a little bit wrong, and then it'll give you an idea, or you'll incorporate it.
Yeah.
It becomes another idea. You do something too big, too small, something like that.
You were gonna
I
say,
think that in my drawings, the thing that I find that I can criticize is that there's a certain amount of apprehension in when I do the work. Will it please the editors? Will it please the public? Am I drawing this accurately enough? And what happens is I tighten up, and it loses that spontaneous feeling that that makes, you know, like a New Yorker cartoon that's done, you know, freely. It loses that spontaneity. I start, you know, making the lines instead of doing them freehand, where it be a little wiggle, I rule it. And when I see it afterwards, I say, no, I should have done it the way my sketch was.
Well, the New Yorker has two stages. There's the cartoonists do roughs, called a rough, and then a finish. And some cartoonists do have problems with the finish, where they tighten up. They can't get the certain feel that they had when they drew it. They'll put it on a light box, and they just won't get it right. But so that becomes... It's a terrible problem, and we need a support group for people who suffer so much.
We have to meet every Wednesday.
Really, our heart.
well, as we start to finish up here, it struck me that a couple years ago for your birthday, I don't remember which one it was, but I remember you telling me you're sitting at home watching the Colbert Report, and all of a sudden Colbert comes out for your birthday and has this cake, and then takes the middle part out and pushes the two sides together, and it reads, do you remember?
Al, you are old.
It's good news, bad news. You get recognition on national TV, and he
that's
tells you you're old. The point is, a very sweet moment.
Yeah.
Very sweet. I'm not sure if you can see it on YouTube or not, but it's a very, very sweet moment. A musician will get up in front of 20,000 people, a very popular musician, will get up in front of thousands of people and get instant gratification. The actor on Broadway will get instant gratification. This is an art form that's usually done in solitude. Have you had moments, though, of being kind of like a fly on the wall, in a subway, on a train, anywhere, where all of a sudden you come upon someone looking at a piece of your work and you get to see the reaction unfiltered?
Well, the thing is, when people are by themselves, they rarely laugh on subways, or else people come and get them.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have.
No, yeah. Well, so I don't think much, but what happens is you get fan mail, you get people writing you get people really like, this is actually, I'm sure you're going to give us a huge amount of that. We need it. Look how desperate, how lonely we are. No, but you get this where people really, that's how really you experience it. Also, people reprint the cartoons, and you see them in unusual places, and that really makes you, it's gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
My earliest experience with something like that was when the fold-in idea was fairly new. I think it must have been the 5th or 6th one that I did. And I went to the candy store or the newspaper store, and two kids, as I was going in, two kids came out with one Mad magazine. And I stopped, and they walked over and sat down on the curb, and one of them said, "Turn to the back page, let's do the fold-in." And that was a very sweet moment. So I decided to do it for another 40 years.
And you're still looking for those kids.
Yeah, I'm looking for them.
Roz, I'll give you the final word. First of all, anything along those lines of a moment where you came upon people that were looking at your work, or If not, I have a follow-up question. When you're doing what was the early strip that you did called Jackie and Blackie?
Oh, Jackie and
Yeah.
Blackie, when I was really little.
How young were you?
Probably about 5.
Oh, this is really young.
Really little, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And so maybe a little bit beyond that, the notion that, thousands, millions of people would one day read your work.
La 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 la. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we can end on a better note than that.
La 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 la. You can't have better than la 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 la.
Well, look, all three of you, how can you put a price on making someone laugh? And all three of you have done it time and time again. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.